Well, uh, good to be with you all here tonight, and looking forward to initiating a conversation. I'm going to be talking a bit about existing infrastructure related to energy here in the region. Oop, that's there we are. Talking about energy infrastructure in the region and sort of setting the stage for a conversation about microgrids. And then I will pass things over to, I think, Beth Burks, and then Heidi, and then Linnea, who will focus more on microgrids themselves and the role that microgrids can play in filling some of the gaps that I will talk about in the existing energy infrastructure. So I'll just start out with a few key overarching points about energy infrastructure here in our region. I guess first is, when we think from a historical perspective, the history of the energy infrastructure in Humboldt County is basically was built to serve the timber industry. And it was really built out in the 2 decades following World War II, which was an economic boom period. And there was enormous extraction of old growth redwood and other timber from this region. And there was energy infrastructure that was built out to supply power to the mills and to otherwise enable that. So that's the history of the very short version of the history of why the infrastructure is configured the way it is and where things are where they are. And really, the infrastructure that we have today is not that different from what was built out in those 2 decades. The components have been upgraded and replaced, but the architecture of the system is more or less as it was in the mid-1960s at this point. So there were significant investments in both electrical and natural gas infrastructure that occurred in that post-World War II boom, economic boom period. And then following that, since the mid-60s, investments that have occurred in the energy infrastructure have really focused on maintaining rather than expanding the infrastructure. So there have been, the power plant that's just south of here in Eureka, or just south of Eureka at King Salmon. That's a replacement for a plant that was put in the mid-50s. So there have been investments in maintaining that have been fairly significant in terms of replacing components, but there hasn't really been an expansion of the capacity or of the extent of that infrastructure to any significant degree. And I guess one thing that I won't spend that much time talking about here today, but would be happy to talk about if people have questions, which is the recently approved plan to build transmission infrastructure to support offshore wind. If that infrastructure moved forward, that would be the largest investment in electrical infrastructure to serve Humboldt County ever, but certainly since the mid-1960s. So there really haven't been very significant investments since that period, and this would be the largest. There's lots of nuance to discuss there, lots of pros and cons, but that's not really the focus of tonight. But if people have questions about it, happy to talk about it. So this is a map that shows the primary electrical infrastructure for this region. The blue lines are transmission lines that are owned by Pacific Gas and Electric. The grayish lines are owned by others, and the red is Pacific Power coming down from Oregon. The thicker the line, the higher the capacity the line. And so you can see that our Humboldt County's from an electrical perspective is relatively isolated from the main California grid, and the big power lines run up and down the I-5 corridor and to the east of us. We're connected by some fairly thin power lines that run long distance across rugged and terrain with a fair amount of fire risk. And then there are even smaller lines that run to communities outside of the Humboldt Bay region. The regional electricity use is concentrated in the Humboldt Bay region. That's where most of the population is and most of the electrical demand is. And the average use in Humboldt County is about 90 megawatts. The only reason that number is important is that each of these power lines that connects us to the wider grid can carry about 75 megawatts, and they're meant to be redundant. And so we really only use the capacity of one of them at a time. And so these power lines that connect us to the wider grid are not even enough to cover the average load in this region. And so we need the Humboldt Bay Generating Station, which is the power plant, the natural gas power plant that's just south of here, to make the system work. The system won't work as it's currently configured without that power plant running. Linnea.
So if the average use is 90 megawatts now,
so the offshore wind wouldn't necessarily change the demand, because that's the demand, but it would, the generation that could be associated with that offshore wind could be on the order of 20 times or more larger than our local demand. So it's you could have on the order of maybe 2,000 to 3,000 megawatts of generation capacity in the wind area as it's laid out. And so our infrastructure is vastly underbuilt without significant investments to carry that power. Yeah, I think I got to the end of this slide, so I'll keep moving. This is a map that shows, so this map showed the transmission lines. This map, which is small and hard to see, shows those transmission lines, but it also, all of this purple are the distribution circuits, which are what delivers the power from the substations and the transmission lines to end uses. And I'll do a little bit of a close-up that's just for part of the region so you can get a better sense of it. But all of these small lines are lower voltage lines that are delivering power out to end consumers. And so when we think about the infrastructure, it's not just the transmission lines and the substations and the power plants, it's that distribution infrastructure that also plays a really important role. And when we're thinking about microgrids tend to sit on the distribution system and to solve issues associated with electricity reliability at the distribution scale of things. And so it's useful to be able to see that level of how things are built out as well. The Humboldt Bay Generating Station at King Salmon, or next to King Salmon, is the anchor power plant for the region. It consists of 10 16.3 megawatt engine generators, so it's 163 megawatts. So it by itself could carry the entire load for this region. It mostly doesn't. It mostly supplements what's being delivered from other sources. But if all of the other sources and the power lines go down, it can carry our region. It's primarily fueled by natural gas. It's a dual fuel engine generator, so it can also run on diesel fuel if needed, but mostly it runs on natural gas. And following the public safety power shutoff events of 2019, the system was configured so that the Humboldt Bay region and some of the outlying areas could operate as an island if needed. And since then, we haven't had those kinds of public safety power shutoffs in the Humboldt Bay region the way that they have occurred in some other places. And so that configuration ended up improving electricity reliability in the Humboldt Bay region quite significantly. So, and you look like you're gonna ask a question. Nope. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So this power plant, the way our system's currently configured, is really, really important for making the system operate the way in a way that ends up being reliable for for especially the Humboldt Bay region. I mentioned that its primary energy source is natural gas, and that natural gas comes primarily through a pipeline that runs from the Red Bluff area, mostly over Highway 36, and over to the Humboldt Bay region. That the timeline for natural gas in our region, natural gas was discovered in Tompkins Hill in 1937 and got developed over the next few years and started to supply Eureka as of the early 1940s. That ended up being insufficient to be able to power the electrical infrastructure as they were trying to build it out in the post-World War II period. And so they, PG&E planned this natural gas line, and that gas line was built in 1958 and then expanded over to Blue Lake and Samoa in 1961. So the infrastructure that supplies the gas to the power plant, that's the anchor for our whole region, was built in the late 1950s. Some segments of it have been replaced, but a lot of it is still the same, that same infrastructure. So we're relying on a single gas pipeline that runs over Highway 36, and we all know how stable that is. And without that power plant, our electricity system doesn't work. Now it can run on, the power plant can run on diesel if needed, but that's not a great thing for us to be relying on for if there is a significant outage on that pipeline. So there's 3 days of on-site diesel fuel storage at the power plant. That's our backup for that system. Of course, more could be barged in, but you can imagine in an extended seismic event or other emergency that's a significant vulnerability for us to be relying on that configuration. So that's sort of a big picture configuration of how we're set up. I think the other thing that's useful to think about is the potential for investments in infrastructure in our region. Electricity and gas use in the region have declined over the last couple of decades, mostly because of a reduction in industrial use as the pulp mill and other mills shut down. This is electricity use and this is gas use. You can see they're both declining. Population is shown here in green, and that is increasing slightly. So those declines don't have to do with a drop in population. They have to do with a drop in industrial consumption. It's really hard to convince the state, and it's really hard to convince the utility that they should invest in expanding the infrastructure when the demand is declining. And so for this reason, investments in this region are really focused to the degree that they have occurred on maintaining the system, not on expanding it. And in the absence of some sort of external driver like offshore wind, I think it's pretty unlikely that there will be large investments in energy infrastructure in this region. We just don't have the demand that would drive that. That doesn't mean there haven't been some replacements and some investments. There have been a whole bunch of work that PG&E has carried out to replace wooden poles with metal poles. That makes it a bit more fire resistant or resilient from that perspective. There have been components that have been replaced. There have been substations that have been upgraded. The power plant, the old power plant got replaced with a new power plant. But I would consider all of those to be maintenance type investments. So when we think about electricity reliability outside the Humboldt Bay region, many communities are served by circuits that extend really long distances from Humboldt Bay. So just as an example, thinking about the Trinity and Klamath River valleys as they're served from the Humboldt Bay region, there's a transmission line, a small transmission line that runs from Humboldt Bay out through Maple Creek, up and over, and then down Highway 299 to Willow Creek. to the Willow Creek substation, and then up to the Hoopa substation. Those are, that's a line in a circuit that was built out in the 40s and 50s. And it ends up from those substations having distribution circuits that run long distances up the Trinity River as far as Del Loma, up 299 and over to the Redwood Creek Valley, and then serving the Hoopa Valley up to Witchpeck and down Highway 169, and then out 299 to Orleans and San Luis Bar. So those are really sprawling distribution circuits at the end of a really long, small transmission line. And those circuits are among the least reliable in the state. Outages are extended and frequent. Both the Willow Creek and Hoopa substations and their associated circuits are frequently on the top 10 list of least reliable circuits in the state because of the number of outages that occur there. And so that's the context for thinking about microgrids, is that especially on these for communities like the Hoopa Valley and the upriver part of the Yurok Reservation, Orleans and San Luis Bar, as well as other communities that are in these outlying areas, they're experiencing electricity reliability that is, we don't have the best reliability in the state here in the Humboldt Bay region. Those communities have much, much worse electricity reliability than we have here. And microgrids are a technology that or a system that can play a really important role in working to address that, while also relying primarily on renewable energy sources that are good from an environmental perspective and are also generating revenue during the period that you don't have an outage. And so just to spend a couple of minutes on what a microgrid is. So microgrids are essentially a system that integrates generation, could be a solar array, could be other forms of generation, storage, typically in the form of batteries, and electrical switchgear and a control system to create a set of circuits that can run independently from the regional grid, but they can also run connected to the regional grid, depending on what's happening. So during normal operation, they're connected to the regional grid and they can export power and generate revenue. And during a regional grid outage, they operate in island mode and can provide resilient energy services to connected facilities. So this, from a diagrammatic perspective, gives a sense of that. So you've got a generation source, a storage source, a switchgear that connects to the wider grid, and then a set of loads that are within that area that provides sort of a pocket of resilience in the electrical grid. Over the past decade, multiple innovative microgrids have been developed in Humboldt County, starting with the Blue Lake Rancheria, who's played a leadership role in this. I don't want to steal Heidi's thunder, but this is a picture of the microgrid in blue sky operations. This is a picture of that microgrid on the night of the December 2022 earthquake that took out the grid for the entire region. So Blue Lake, which is behind the Blue Lake Rancheria, is in that picture. It's just there's no light there. And this is what the Rancheria looked like at that time. It's hard to zoom in and see, but there was a whole long line of cars. This was one of the only places that you could get fuel or ice. So the Rancheria was serving thousands of people during that event for that purpose, as well as reserving the ground floor of the hotel for people who had medical conditions and needed medical devices and a whole range of other services. So the Blue Lake Rancheria just moves into this emergency response mode. That's partly enabled by the microgrid, but it's also enabled by how the tribe has prioritized what they want to do in that circumstance and has trained staff to be able to provide all of those services. So it's It's all of those things together that make it this resilience hub and hub of service for our region. And the idea is that we want a lot of those kinds of resilience hubs across our region, because that's what's going to make us stronger collectively to be able to withstand these kinds of outage events. So just a few concluding notes. So to summarize, our electrical system was developed in the post-World War II economic boom period. Investments since the mid-1960s have focused primarily on maintaining rather than expanding the system. Electric service reliability is very poor in some communities in the region, especially on those circuits that extend long distances from Humboldt Bay. And renewable energy microgrids can be used to improve reliability of electric service, especially in these communities. And with that, I will turn things over to Beth to talk about one of the microgrids that the Redwood Coast Energy Authority has played a leadership role in developing. Yeah, you can ask a question.
So what would it cost us to get a system going?
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Beth Burks with the Redwood Coast Energy Authority, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the microgrid at the airport. All right. How are you sounding? Okay. So for those of you who don't know about our CEA, I think many of you do. I see some board members here, some past board members here. But for those of you who don't know, we are your local non-for-profit electricity provider. We are the default provider for Humboldt County. We are a joint powers agency. So we have on our board a representative from each of the cities, the county of Humboldt, and we also have Yurok Tribe and Blue Lake Rancheria on our board. We provide the electricity generation services in place of PG&E. So for most of you, for 90% of the county that are in our service area, you're getting a bill, and we are the generation portion of that bill. We are mission driven. We have local control. We're all about renewable energy, resilience, economic development, or economic benefits, and energy efficiency. So specifically for our microgrid project, it's located at the airport, like on the airport property in McKinleyville. It's a county-owned property. It was California's first renewable front-of-the-meter multi-customer microgrid. So when we say front of the meter, it just means that it can serve multiple customers, not a single home or a single business. It's serving, I think, about 20 customers on the other side. So the core components of this, we've got several components. First of all, there's 300 kilowatts being generated that just goes straight to offset the use at the airport. So this, in a sense, as I mentioned, it's located on the county land at the airport. And so this is essentially paying for our lease. So this is how we cover that. We offset their electricity use at the airport. It covers our ground lease fees. Then there's a solar array that is feeding directly into the wholesale market, and a battery storage system that can provide about 8.9 megawatt hours of energy. And we arbitrage that. So we store the energy, and then when times are good, we're gonna put it back into the wholesale market when things are more expensive. So it does, as Arne mentioned, a feature of a microgrid, it does have the ability to island when necessary. So most of the time, the power we're generating is, again, offsetting the airport and then feeding back into the wholesale market. But when needed, we can island and not feed back into the wholesale market and just take care of those 20 customers. So, the primary benefit to this, the resilience it offered, is it does keep the airport going. When we're in that island mode, it can seamlessly keep the airport functional. It also serves the U.S. Coast Guard and the animal shelter. In addition to some odd uses like the gun club that's out there, we'll always have power. And then, as I mentioned, the rest of it's going to the wholesale market. So our role in that, we were the project developer, and we are currently the owner and operator of this system. It's actually one of the few generation systems that it's the only one that we are the actual owners of. The other systems we have long-term power purchase agreements with, but this is one that we actually own this generation, operated ourselves with the help of Schatz Energy as our engineers of record. And as I mentioned, we're participating in the wholesale market on a day-to-day basis. We don't need to go into that islanding mode. This project development took about 5 years from sort of design and inception to actually going live. So it went, I think the first grants were applied for and the design started in 2018. And then it went actually energized in 2022. The cost for this, we combined some different funding sources. So we had an EPIC grant from the California Energy Commission that was about $5 million. And then we put about $6.7 million in this USDA low interest loan. And so as an organization, as RCEA, we are still paying off that low interest loan. And we are just barely kind of breaking even at this point in terms of what we can sell to the wholesale market and those loan payments. So it is a very long-term investment. We thought it was important for resiliency. I wouldn't say we've realized any, money-making capabilities out of it quite yet. But again, we can, the others we had to coordinate with to get this job done. Federal Aviation Administration, as you can imagine, permitting. You're in California, you're at an airport in California. So definitely a ton of permitting went into this. County of Humboldt as the owner of the property, Schatz Energy Research Center, doing, prime contractor, integrator, designer, just huge project partner on this, continues to be our engineer of record, continues to help us with maintenance of the site. PG&E, utility partner, again, they cover that distribution and transmission component of it. And really, we feed through them to go into that wholesale market. It is a Tesla solar and battery storage system out there. So why it matters, I think we're all familiar with how important it is to keep the airport going. It's 50,000 flights annually. We do our emergency medical transport out of there. And the Coast Guard serves 250 miles of search and rescue territory. And again, we can keep them going when we go into islanding. So we have, as already mentioned, with that earthquake in 2022, our system went live in June of 2022. That earthquake was in December, and the 6.4 was in December that year. And we seamlessly were able to serve the airport for 15 hours while the power was out. I think 70,000 customers were out of power. Airport stayed on for 15 hours thanks to those batteries that we had installed. So since that time, we're all familiar with the 7.0 that happened a couple years later. There's been over 14 atmospheric river events. Oh, and one thing I wanted to mention about that 6.4, that was on December 20th, which was the solstice. So you think about this as a solar array, heavy storms, which were happening at that same time. So, lowest, the sort of darkest time you can imagine, and it still was able to keep the power on for 15 hours. So I think it's just really a testament to the design and that it works and that it can provide that resilience even in kind of the most adverse circumstances. So we've had, fortunately and unfortunately, a lot of opportunities to test it, and it works for the purpose that it was intended. So that's really it for me. Does anyone have any questions?
All right. Thank you for having me here tonight. It's a privilege to be able to represent Blue Lake Rancheria and the innovations that we are continuing to develop. So just to give a little context, most of the folks in the room know where we're situated, but the folks on the webinar might not. So we want to give a little geographical context. So this is the state of California, and we are located up in the real northern portion of California, about 6 hours north of San Francisco, where most people think it ends. And then this is a picture of the Humboldt Bay, and Blue Lake Rancheria is located about 13 miles east of the Humboldt Bay. We are well known as an energy innovator and a leader. We were able to commission the first of its kind behind the meter microgrid. We are able to provide resilient energy resources when access to the grid is compromised. You heard of 2 examples here already from Beth. And for all of that innovation, Blue Lake Rancheria received the 2016 Obama Clean Action Champion Award, which we are still very, very proud of. We have a very diverse approach to decarbonization. That includes, obviously, our microgrids, But also we worked with Grid Alternatives and we designed a portable, though it does require 2 strappingly strong people to lift it. But they're called Moore-Bugs, and these are solar generating generators. So if you think about a tarp that you can open up and lay across a building, a storage shed or a truck bed, the solar electrification generates enough energy that then you can plug things into this generator that is 0 emissions. We also did a hotel remodel with LEED industry standards. Wanted to make sure that the choices we are making about materials were done so through an environmental lens. We are actively engaged in comprehensive land acquisitions. We have recently, so a year ago, we had 100 acres at Blue Lake Casino and Hotel. And since then, we've diversified to 800 acres across the region, 400 of which are forested lands, and an additional 250 of sea level rise vulnerable marshlands. And then we are being the stewards and the tenders of those lands. We are increasingly diversifying our vehicle fleet to EVs. We are upgrading equipment, engaged in sea level rise mitigation. Humboldt Bay is one of the fastest levels of sea level rise in the nation. We are working on restoration practices, cultural burns, air and water quality monitoring, data dashboards, all with a lens of working towards green, teal, and blue economies. So Arne has already kind of identified the components of a microgrid, but just to reinforce as an educator myself, oftentimes if you hear something more than once, it's 6, but you're looking at a generation source. In our case, that is primarily a PV solar array. Then you're looking at an energy storage. In our case, these are batteries, large scale batteries. And then you're looking at the brains behind the operation to be able to make decisions about what to do with that stored electrification under certain circumstances. So working with the Schatz Energy Research Center to develop state-of-the-art software that really guides our microgrids. So you'll see this illustrated in a visual example. And then you'll see we actually have 4 independent microgrids. We often talk about the large scale microgrid that most of you are familiar with, but our convenience store and gas station has above the tanks there, the pumps, we have photovoltaic, and we're able to completely support the C-store with our microgrid. Then also at the tribal government office, we have an independent microgrid. And then we have the campus scale microgrid, almost the same exact images that Arne shared. And I do have to give props. I believe this was Arne flying a drone during that earthquake event to capture that picture, which has been shown internationally as an exemplar for how resilience really does matter in times of greatest need. And then just to again mention that what we did at Blue Lake Rancheria helped to inform what happened at the airport. So our microgrid features a solar array here and here, batteries, the control systems, and then in the event such as the December 20th event of the 6.4 earthquake that rendered our region pretty incapacitated, we do have a backup tier 4 generator, which is the cleanest generator that exists in the market. And so because it was a dark, blustery, cold day, we weren't generating new electrification through the solar panels. So we used our solar battery storage for as long as we possibly could. But there can be a lot of deterioration of the battery quality if you go beyond 30%. So when we got to about 31%, we switched over to our diesel generators. But again, making decisions about our purchasing of generators to make sure that they are as clean as possible. Why does it matter? Arne talked a lot about this already, but in terms of making sure that we are a beacon of hope in our region's times of critical disaster. So Arne mentioned that our hotel becomes transitioned for folks that need home dialysis access. We provided ice, we provided a warming center, charging center for folks. We provided daycare services for folks that needed to go to work. We provided access to warm food. And in a very large scale event, we have some new facilities, a health clinic, for example, and a 16,000 square foot workforce development site that could transition to temporary emergency housing if we needed to. And so we want to be known as like the safe place to go, the island in times of despair. So, yes. Well, I'm going to get into the terrace and then I'm going to pitch it over to Arne, who's going to talk maybe about the large scale project. So great question. So I talked about 4 independent microgrids. They work independently now. Our large scale vision is to be able to take each of those microgrids and fold it into the TAM campus, which is a resiliency campus microgrid, and network them together. So the analogy I like to use might not be a perfect analogy, but as a Ukrainian nesting doll. You can play with all the electrification from those 4 microgrids as one and send it all to one location across the campus, or you can segment it and send 2 to one direction, 2 to another, 3, 1, 4, etc. That gives us the maximum flexibility to determine how we engage with our electrification. If there was the Cascadia subduction event and we had a massive natural disaster, and we said that we want to prioritize our health clinic and the TAM Resilience Center to provide a short-term housing for 1,000 people, we could send the electrification from the C-store, from the tribal government office, all to that direction. It gives us the max flexibility for how we engage and interact with the electrification. So Arne, relative to the Terrace project, all told, what would be the capacity?
Of the integrated connect system?
Yes.
I actually don't know that number. I think it's megawatts, but I don't.
A few megawatts is what I believe he said, and I think you're right. I think we're talking about 3 megawatts or so. The Blue Lake microgrids. Once, right now we are just about 1 megawatt with our existing systems.
Gas stations, I think it's like
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're like a little bit over 1 with your capacity.
Yes, currently, but when we're going to continue to build out the Terrace project and bring on new technologies and new equipment, at that point in time, it'll be about 3 megawatts worth of power upon the campus. And so also what we're doing at Blue Lake Rancheria with the support of Redwood Coast Energy Authority and the Schatz Research Center is we are proving up this state-of-the-art, never done before technology to serve as the demonstration site for a much larger integration that Linnea is going to talk about. So we are very, very proud. We are a very small rural community, but we are engaged in technological advances that can help rural America, that can help rural global energy access. And to that end, thank you. These are our partners. It includes the Redwood Coast Energy Authority. They stepped up in a big way to be our administrative lead. Blue Lake is innovating on the technology, which then will be adopted by Hoopa Valley and the Yurok tribe. We're working with PG&E. Arne talked about upgrades to the existing Hoopa 1101 would be in the billions of dollars. We would be able to provide a companion system for about under $300 million. So it really is a bargain. And then, of course, with the technical acumen and expertise of the Schatz Energy Research Center. The impacts and benefits of the TERRAS project, which stands for Tribal Energy Resilience and Sovereignty, are reliable electrification, cost savings, revenue generation, reduced emissions, especially in culturally sensitive areas, our ability to be the hope in times of darkness and emergencies, gives us maximum flexibility with our electrification. It increases tribal independence across the 3 tribes, and it leads to well-paying jobs. We have developed and designed, along with the Hupa, Karuk, and Yurok tribes, a low voltage apprenticeship program. And there are multiple opportunities for these graduates to either work in the offshore wind industry, to work in residential commercial, to work on tribal lands, and to steward our microgrids. I want to talk just for a moment about the next S-curve for Blue Lake Rancheria. We have just completed phase 1 of a 2-phase TAM resilience campus, a 16,000 square foot resilience and training center, which will house a lot of the workforce development and training that's going to be needed across this region. I also wanted to mention that we were the recipients, along with other tribes and the Redwood Coast Energy Authority, of an $88 million Department of Energy GRIP grant. And we hadn't heard anything since May 17th of last year. And we were very, very concerned that our project, the TERRAS project, which is carving the way for rural electrification across our country, was not going to happen. And so we've had philanthropy step up and say, how can we help support bridging the gap? And we are just so thankful. But also recently, we've had the Department of Energy recently outreach and say, would you be willing to re-engage in negotiations if you cut out the solar? So we have to make some significant concessions. We have to cut out solar because for whatever reason, solar's not part of the agenda, even though it happens to be an incredible resource that we have access to in rural California. And we really need to start looking at what are your inherent resources instead of it becoming politically motivated. And what we have here on the North Coast is the best wind in the world and some really reliable solar. So we're hoping that we can work with the Department of Energy and you folks that are on working in elected positions on the webinar to hopefully advance these innovations in electrification, because I believe that we all share the common objective of increasing access to reliable electrification. But to do so, we have to do it using a whole diverse array of resources that make sense for any particular region. So with that, I thank you for your time. Any questions?
Okay. So I don't know everybody here. Some faces I do, but again, my name is Linnea Jackson. I'm a member of the Hoopa Valley Tribe. I serve as the general manager for my tribal utility. It's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to collaborating with partnerships. There's a lot of connections that can happen with state and local and tribal governments. And I think we're aligned here with our kind of efforts of what we want to achieve in the North Coast. Let's see how we work this. Okay. So I just kind of wanted to level set. This is the Hoopa Valley Reservation. It's a drone shot from Bald Hill. You can kind of see the very tip of our communication tower up here. And so you see it's mountainous, it's rural, it's densely forested, right? So there's a lot of beauty that comes with that. And there's a lot of infrastructure, objectives that are hard to reach. So again, this is Hoopa, this is our homeland. So again, we're level setting here. Arne had talked about, those different lines that come through, and Hoopa. So if the King Salmon power went down, that doesn't serve Hoopa because it's off of those different circuits, right? So when there's power outages, it affects us a little bit differently. And we have to provide, different sources of resiliency. And I see that more as a central kind of located area where we're partnering with, Willow Creek and even unincorporated cities. We're partnering with local tribes. There's a lot of resources that can be maximized to benefit the entire region. And so I just wanted to level set that Hoopa is one of the tribes that we've been in that same valley for, 10 to 15,000 years, depending on the carbon dating. We're a really proud, resilient people, and it's our homeland forever. So we're making these technology selections, which is hard because you're looking at battery chemical composition. You're looking at taking footprints for solar, where maybe it was, one time adjacent to a village site, or adjacent to the river, or maybe it's affecting viewshed, right? So, sorry. So you're kind of you're trying to protect cultural resources, who we are as people, but also provide the resources that we absolutely need. This is our traditional homes. If you've ever been there, they're half above ground, half below, for cooling, for heating, and all of those things. So just a level set there. So the Hoopa Valley Tribe has 60 different departments. PUD, which I'm the general manager of, is a chartered entity of the tribe, or one of 60. We were established through resolution in 1982. And it's something that I'm really proud to be a part of. We provide core and foundational utilities for the entire reservation. Here's some of my team, but just the foundational utilities. We're domestic and safe, clean drinking water. We're irrigation services. We're solid waste management. We operate the transfer station, construction services for water and septic, broadband, which is a huge thing that we're doing now. We're partnering with California Department of Technology. We're building out some of the state's middle mile. We're building out fiber to the home, communication towers, a small data center, which is the only one in the region at this moment in our small region. And so our data center will be online. We're just waiting for energization, and we should be moved in by May. Also some energy initiatives that are core. So all of these functions are housed under our tribal utility, and it's a lot of hats to wear. So every day from day to day, I'm jumping in on a water storage meeting, and then I need to put off, grab a cup of coffee, and then all of a sudden I'm on a construction meeting, right? And then we're talking broadband, data center, and then we're going to energy, and that could be like fluid throughout the day. So I'll pat myself on the back for that one, but it's a lot to carry. And obviously I can't do without my team. We have a board of directors, we have our tribal council. So it takes everybody to make that happen. So we're a small and mighty team. So we're always looking at impacts, right? So you saw the forest, you saw a remote, we're in it. See, we're already starting partnerships. Right? I don't know why I can't get this attached. Oh, it has a, okay. Sorry about that. I think I'm good now. Okay, let's go back really quickly. Okay, so we're fire threat districts, right? Every year there's wildfires, whether that's in the valley or surrounding areas, that impacts air quality, that impacts, PSPSs that can happen. There's so many things that come with that. So Arne talked about the reliability of our circuit. This data is straight from PG&E's annual reliability report that goes to the CPUC, and their own topic for this section is the top 1% of the worst performing circuits. 1%. And if you see this arrow, here we are at the Hoopa 1101 circuit, and we're in the top 3 for outage minutes. And so if you look at the average customer of PG&E, they might range from, give or take 200 minutes of outages per year. We are over 3,168 outage minutes. So if you think the exponential time frame of the outage minutes that we receive, so think about what I manage. It's affecting water. You know, you have to have pump resiliency though, so that water can contain. You're looking at critical communications. It's the broadband, it's the emergency services, it's medical devices. We have people that, you know, you're trying to hook up and daisy chain a generator. Otherwise, you're going to lose your food sources. You know, they're traditional foods. You can't just go to Costco and get your, you know, traditional salmon and your berries and all of those things. There's things that you can't replace, right? So think about that. Top 1% of the worst performing circuit, 3,000 outage minutes. When we're talking about elected officials and policies that need to be changed, so if you look at the circuits that are in the red, that means that they have been on the top list for multiple years over and over, right? To me, I don't understand why policy does not follow immediate investment, required investment into those circuits, right? I understand low client base, low demand, but it's also resiliency issues that are impacting quality of life. So you're thinking about in the red, top 3, that's a huge statement to me. And I always love to say, you know, the top 1% worst performing, all we can go is up from here. And that's what we're trying to achieve. So I was actually out of town. So we talked about wildfires, right? You're looking at high temperatures, maybe drought conditions, high temps. So HUPA in the summer can also, you know, be upwards of 105, 110 on some days. But this was last Wednesday. So when I was out of town, we had that storm event that came in. And so this is my crew going up to our communications tower. So power's out, generator faulted, did not turn on. So the transfer switch called for power, didn't turn on. So these guys get to bring out the toys. So they had a great time troubleshooting because it's critical communication, right? But you can see, you can barely get up to the tower. We had brought this side by side with tracks. So they love, you know, an excuse to do that. But they're going up to the tower for critical communications. You know, on that tower is AT&T, the sheriff's department, you know, all of those critical communications that are up there. So that's our team. And this is just last Wednesday. The snow doesn't stick, but the snow definitely has an impact. You're looking at the snow that's weighing down the trees. Trees will snap, power line comes down, right? So there's all of those things. And so there's my team's resilience to create communications when power goes out, backup resiliency didn't kick on. So what we're trying to do here is there's not going to be one funding source that's going to solve everything. We have grants from the Bureau of Indian Affairs Energy Mineral Development Program. We have a Tribal Energy Capacity Grant. I want to thank the Humboldt Area Foundation who has come in to support not only through Core Hub, because we've had a lot of time into that, right? But also the Tribal Climate Resilience Network that brings together local tribes, provides resources, allows us to attend events, have a voice, you know, provide legal response. So maybe we can sign on to a letter and have, you know, our voices heard from a stronger collaborative body. And so I wanted to big up philanthropy, which is what we're going to need to come in, right? So we have a regional resilience grant program that's being facilitated by RCEA. And I'm working with Juliet on that. That's providing resilience to fire departments. So our HUPA Fire is getting resiliency, solar, battery backup as well. And that project actually served 17 different fire department projects across the county. That's amazing. I always said that's a bit ambitious, but okay, I like it. It's working. These two are still in negotiations, but we're working with PG&E on a community microgrid incentive program. We've had to push back on policy and contract language, and that means having to submit comments to record, going back to the CPUC to open up the proceeding and have them consider changes to policy, right? So that's a huge state. That's your legal team. That's your, you know, writing team. That's working with our regulators. And so it takes partnerships again, and I'm going to highlight that again. We're also working with the California Energy Commission on a long duration energy storage battery project. We expect to have that award on the May business meeting. That's in partnership with Schatz Energy Research Center. We couldn't do it without our technical team. But you're looking at, it's my favorite thing to say, is like a vanadium redox battery, right? You're not looking at lithium, you're looking at different technology. Is that proven? Is that outsourced? You know, we have their team that's actually meeting with them, going to the site visit, because Pesquenta on the 105 or the I-5 and Viejas also have a same program where they've been able to go see the technology in person. So we're looking at a long duration energy storage component of that. I'll talk a little bit about DOE, and this is, you know, my personal feeling on it. It is devastating when change in administration. We've worked years. This is our second round of submitting for DOE funding under the GRIP, Grid Resilience and Innovative Partnerships, right? So we submitted under CTERA, weren't awarded. Then we decided to come with a regional approach, and we got the conditional award, right? Only to have changes in administration saying, we're going to roll all that back. We're going to pull $7.5 billion from this country. And then last night at the State of the Union, he's still saying, drill, baby, drill, right? So this is my own disgust with that. But I feel like, you know, those can cycle. What this country is hoping for can change in 2 years. And we will be here. So I have no doubt we'll receive all the funding. It's which program is going to fund it and how long is that going to take? So we've talked about tribal energy resilience and sovereignty. We are looking at solar, battery, and in HUPA, a small hydro project. So we're looking at different resiliency, so where we can provide the 24-hour resiliency that's required under the MIP grant. So we're having to stack these programs in order to come up with the holistic solution. Again, we couldn't do it without RCEA, who's the lead applicant. Couldn't do it without Schatz, and we couldn't do it without our project partners. Just a little bit about the Valley. We're looking at solar and Masonite Mill Creek, solar and battery on Wagner. We're looking at the substation and a small hydro project. And that's all different technology selections, right? You're looking at different components. You're looking at watershed protection. You're looking at a creek that has, you know, endangered species in our salmonoid population in the whole ecosystem. So it's not just technology, it's not just the funding to build, it's cultural protection and environmental protection as well. So with that, this is designed to, this area you see here is the core zone. So with the available funding, that island, that area in pink would be able to be sustained during an outage. So with the collaborative projects, we would have the whole circuit. You have Upriver Yurok, and they're developing their own technology solution, so they'd be able to island. And then the HUPA 1101, I think, is 144 or 142 miles circuit, and it goes all the way up to Orleans and to Somes Bar. So you're looking at a wide region. And so you think about the partnerships that could happen there. You're coming with the project here being able to island. You're coming out with HUPA with resiliency being able to island and support. And, you know, Northern, there's other projects as well. So we're looking at a regional huge footprint that we can support for energy resiliency. And so since we're talking about elected officials, I wanted to, you know, commend the California Energy Commission. The CPUC was also at this. We need our elected officials, whether that be state, local, or federal, to be supportive of this, to understand the investment that's needed. So I wanted to say that they passed a resolution supporting tribal energy sovereignty, and those types of awareness needs to continue to happen. Again, it's the Energy Commission, California Public Utilities Commission. You had the local tribes there. You had our energy resilience partners. And that also, you know, comes to, you know, the Humboldt County Commission and the city commissions. So we talked about workforce development. You know, we're a part of this county. We're included in those numbers. There needs to be more partnership as well. So I'm just going to continue to say that. But the elected officials need to keep continuing to support these projects and understand the importance and resiliency needs that are there. What are our goals here? So we talked about self-generation. We're going to improve energy resiliency. We're going to strengthen tribal energy sovereignty. We're uplifting communications infrastructure, our fiber optic network, solar and battery solutions, climate adaptation goals, and we need to have state and federal collaboration. We need to develop those regional partnerships, philanthropic partnerships, and we want to be a North Coast resilience leader, not only in the North Coast, in this state, and in this country. So that is our goals. I believe that's my last slide. Again, welcome to HOOPA. Thank you for letting me share. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.